Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, everyone. Whatever part of the world you're in, it is my pleasure to welcome you today to the African Press Club event on Discover Zimbabwe. It's a series that we have been doing. We started 2 weeks ago on Discover Africa, and we're going to be going around the continent to talk about different countries. And the interesting thing about this, or the more exciting thing for me on this program, is that we actually get to talk to people that live in those countries. So we get to hear from them, hear their perspectives, listen to their voices. There's nobody mediating between us. We're hearing direct from them. So that's the interesting thing for me. 2 weeks ago, when we had Zimbabwe, it was very interesting. No, when we had Tanzania, it was very interesting. I learned a lot. I hope that you also learn a lot today. So the format will be introductions, and then we'll have the presentation by the speaker, and then we open it up for questions and answers from the audience. So I'll go ahead and introduce the speaker. By the way, I forgot to say my name. My name is Chiogo Ikoku, and I am the editorial lead at the African Press Club. Everything concerning editorial, I manage. So to the speaker, Arthur Mataruse, AKA Arthur. Arthur has 9 years experience as a creative producer, focused on producing video content, stills photography, and has moved into the realm of animation, children's educational animation, edutainment in vernacular languages specifically. Following his passion for clothing and his nomination by a fashion film festival for best styling in a fashion film, Arth has now ventured into clothing manufacturing, where he's still in his early stages. Also in his early stages is food production, stemming from his love of food and all-round wellness. Arth is now a small-scale urban chicken farmer with greater interest in ethical and sustainable food production. Sounds very exotic. Art's main focus in life is portraying stories of Zimbabweans and Africans through his perspective, as well as creating visibility among alternative ways of a well-balanced and mindful life within and among Zimbabweans. Art's favorite saying is, "There's no fixed template to achieving this life thing." That's a good one. And then our moderator today will be Tawanda Mudzonga. Tawanda Mudzonga is a journalist, editor, and storyteller. She's of Zimbabwean and American heritage and grew up in Zimbabwe, where she completed her high school education, followed by an undergraduate degree in sociology and anthropology at Dennis University in the USA. Tawanda has been involved in communications and media for over 10 years. She has been in charge of shaping the communications and branding of Zimbabwe Women's Resource Network, and also of the Book Cafe, which is organized by the British Council and Pemberley Trust. She has also served as the editor of Zimbabwe's first feminist online portal, Her Zimbabwe, as well as the editor of the print edition of Harare News. Her essays about the city of Harare were published in the ebook Letters from Africa by UK publisher The Pigeonhole in 2015. Currently, she is the co-owner and editor of the recently relaunched Harare News Online. She is the host of the Fix Harare podcast by Harare News, as well as the editor of their monthly e-newsletter. So let's welcome Tawanda Mudzonga and Arthur Mataruse. So I'm going to hand it over to Arthur. We have your presentation, so let me share my screen so that I can put it up here, then we can start. Okay, we're ready, Arthur.
Cool. Thank you so much, Yogor. And hello to everyone. And hello, Tawanda. Haven't seen you in a while. How are you doing? Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening or afternoon or whatever time, wherever you are, for this presentation on my favorite place in the world, Zimbabwe, which is my home. And thank you, TAPC, for giving us this platform to share our stories. So as my presentation goes, 15 things you might not know about Zimbabwe. And starting on next slide, starting on slide number 1.
Oops, okay, sorry.
There we go. Zimbabwe was one of the last countries to gain independence, to attain independence from the British Empire. And that happened in the year 1980. And we celebrate our Independence Day on the 18th of April every year. And what used to happen on independence celebrations is the president would give a national address at the National Sports Stadium, where there'll be festivities and performances by different acts, where the local musicians or the National Army Band and the police and their dogs. Yeah, so the celebrations that happen every 18th of April, but with COVID regulations, things have since changed. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Okay.
The first president of Zimbabwe was Canaan Sodindo Banana, who was a Zimbabwean Methodist minister and theologian and politician. He served as president from the year 1980 to the year 1987. And in 1987, then Robert Mugabe then took over. So from 1980 to 1987, Robert Mugabe was the prime minister of Zimbabwe and later became president. Canaan Sodindo Banana was later convicted of molestation and sodomy and served quite a number of years in a prison called Konmara here in Zimbabwe. And then he passed on in the early 2000s. Next slide, please. The national flower of Zimbabwe is called the flame lily. It's a very, very beautiful flower. And in Ndebele, it's called Amakukulume. And in my language, which is Shona, it is called Kajongwe, which directly translates to little rooster. This tropical flower is found in other parts of the continent, as well as Australia and Asia. The flower is quite toxic when ingested, so it is not encouraged to grow the flower in people's home gardens in case it is ingested by children. Next slide, please. We have 16 official languages in Zimbabwe. We have Chewa, we have Chibarwe, English, Kalanga, Khoisan, Nambia, Ndau, Ndebele, Shangan, Shona, Sign Language, Sutu, Tonga, Tswana, Venda, and Xhosa. Sutu, Tonga, Tswana, Venda, Xhosa, you'll also find them, and Shangan and Ndebele, you'll also find them in South Africa. And as for our local languages, if we look at Shona, which is my language, it comes in very different dialects. For instance, I'm a Vitori, and then another dialect is Karanga, another dialect is Manyika, and a few other dialects. But the predominantly spoken languages in Zimbabwe are English, Shona, and Ndebele. Next slide, please. The current vice president of Zimbabwe is Constantino Chiwenga, who's a retired army general. And the fun fact about our vice president is he is also the Minister of Health after the previous Minister of Health was deposed from his job. Next slide, please. Our staple food here in Zimbabwe is sadza. It's a traditional food which is made out of ground sorghum. It can be ground sorghum, it can be ground finger millet, or ground maize meal. It is usually served with a leafy vegetable or a legume like sugar beans, and a portion of meat as protein. And next slide, please. Here in Zimbabwe, we share Lake Kariba with Zambia, and it is the largest man-made lake and it lies 1,200 kilometers upstream from the Indian Ocean. And this lake has a very fascinating story. When it was being built, when the dam was being built, the dam which supplies hydroelectric power to both Zimbabwe and Zambia. When this dam was being built, the construction company used to have a lot of trouble with the dam being destroyed during construction. Up until they approached the leaders in the villages surrounding the construction site, and they asked them what they should do. And they did a traditional ceremony to appease a spirit called the Nyami Nyami spirit. If you look at the picture on your screens right now, you can see part of a sculpture, which is the sculpture of Nyami Nyami, who is a serpent god who used to take care of the people in that area. So once they managed to appease the serpent god, Nyami Nyami, the construction managed to continue and to finish. And the reason why the construction was problematic, the story goes that Nyami Nyami was angry that he was being separated from his wife by the dam wall, where the other side of the wall, his wife had been trapped and his wife is a mermaid. Next slide, please. After Botswana, Zimbabwe has the second largest elephant population in the world, with more than 85,000 elephants at the moment. And we have a history of pretty violent elephants in Zimbabwe. So when one goes for game drives in Zimbabwe, usually rangers will let you know that they have a shoot to kill policy if they feel that elephants are intimidating and will cause harm. Although usually the rangers we have here in Zimbabwe will know if tempers are rising from a mother elephant or something, and then they'll make sure that the car starts moving before any harm is at bay. But yes, we've got a very, very large elephant population, and this causes a lot of trouble with some villages where there are quite a lot of elephant attacks. Next slide, please. So we have two very protected animals here in Zimbabwe, the python and the pangolin. If you spot a python in your yard, so for instance, some people who live in the outskirts of cities or on farms, if you spot a python or a pangolin close to your residential, to your residence, you're not allowed to capture or kill the animals. You're supposed to call the national parks and they'll come and take the animals. When Robert Mugabe was alive, each pangolin that was captured out of its habitat was gone and presented to him and was put into the president's garden. As for pythons, when the pythons are captured, they just put back out into the wild. So with pythons, you have the option of just letting it do what it's doing and it goes back into the wild. If it does not go back into the wild, then you call the national parks to come and take the python. These two animals are very revered by people who practice traditional spirituality. Pythons are thought to be animals that move with ancestral spirits. This is also the same as lions here. And pangolins are animals that are just revered by people who practice traditional spirituality. Next slide, please. And in terms of music, we have quite a vibrant music scene here in Zimbabwe. But what I'd like to speak about in this presentation particularly is Zimbabwe dancehall, which is a very popular music genre amongst young and older Zimbabweans, because it is a very vibey genre and it also speaks to a lot of what is going on in society. So sometimes people will be dancing along a lot to the music, but the core message of the music a lot of the time is what people are really going through in society, whether it be fun times or whether it be things that are somber. But Zim dancehall is a very popular genre here, and I've put some of our popular artists on the slide, and I've shared with TAPC some links to some songs that I like that are Zim dancehall songs, and I hope you guys get to enjoy those songs as well. Next slide, please. So in Zimbabwe, we use the Zimbabwe dollar, which is abbreviated as ZWL. Now, this Zimbabwe dollar exists in quite a lot of forms. As you can see in the picture, there are paper notes. Those specific notes are called bond notes. And then there are digital transactions that are done with the Zim dollar as well. And these we call RTGS, which is real-time gross settlement. And that's mainly to do with digital banking and digital transactions. The Zim dollar also has microcurrencies. The most popular one is EcoCash, which is mobile phone-based money transfer that is run by the biggest cell phone operator here in Zimbabwe, Econet. And then other cell phone operators like Net1 has got One Money, and then Telecel has got Telecash. And the very interesting thing about the microcurrencies, which are the RTGS, EcoCash, Telecash, and One Money, is they all have a different market value to the bond note or any foreign currency or foreign currency trades. And I was asked also just to speak a bit about what runs the Zim economy whilst we're on the Zimbabwean currency. And traditionally, gold has been what backs Zimbabwe's economy. But due to, there's just a lot of speculation around minerals in Zimbabwe. And at this point in time, I cannot speak to what is the actual backing of the Zimbabwean economy, but we do have a lot of mineral wealth. Gold, we have diamonds, we've got platinum, and also the farming sector is growing back. And at some point, we can speak more about the economy of Zimbabwe when we get to the Q&A section. Next slide, please. One of my favorite things about Zimbabwe, I love aliens, the existence of or non-existence of them. I love aliens as a topic in general, just because I think in this fast universe, it would be quite fascinating if we're the only beings, we're not the only beings, we've got animals, but the only so-called quote unquote intelligent beings in this universe. In 1994, at a school called Ariel in an area called Ruwa in Zimbabwe, 60 students reported sighting a UFO and that a strange being communicated with them. These 60 primary school children were all put in different classes and were interviewed and were told to draw what they saw. And they all drew a similar spacecraft, a similar being, and were all told, they all experienced a similar sensation from what they saw. There's actually a YouTube clip on Ariel School on this specific alien sighting. Next slide, please. In Zimbabwe, there's a clan called the Doma people. And the Doma people here, I've put a very old picture. From what I know, they're now protected, so people aren't really allowed to venture where they are and take pictures. And when you go to Dema, where they reside, it's hard to actually find where they are. But these people are born with 2 toes. They do not have 5 toes like all of us. They're born with 2 toes, and they are excellent tree climbers. Next slide, please. The name Zimbabwe is derived from Zimbabwe, houses, which means houses of stone. And Zimbabwe is popularly known as Great Zimbabwe, which is where the Mutapa Empire held its capital during its reign. And the Mutapa Empire was spread across to Mozambique and parts of Zambia, and it held its capital at Great Zimbabwe, which is in the Masvingo district of Zimbabwe. And the last slide, please. According to worldometer.info, the population of Zimbabwe as of 2020 is currently 14,862,924 people. Yeah, so we're quite a lot of people for a small country. Zimbabwe is quite a small country. And that's it from me. And last slide, Ndinotenda Nyabonga, thank you. And Ndinotenda is thank you in Shona. Nyabonga is thank you in Ndebele. And thank you is thank you in English.
Okay. Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation, Arthur. There are some similarities between Zimbabwe and Nigeria, which I'll come to later. But I would like to hand it over to Tawanda to then open up to anybody that has a question.
Thanks, Yogo. Arthur, that was a fantastic presentation. It's so lovely to hear people talking about Zimbabwe in a positive light. So really awesome job. Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, I guess this is a part of the meeting where Arthur and I, any questions you guys might have, we're happy to talk about Zimbabwe till the cows come home. Just like Arthur, Zimbabwe is my favorite place in the world, and I've lived many places, but this is home. Home is home. Home is best. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat, or raise your hand, or so I'm going to go to the first question. There's a comment, actually. Interesting to know about python being protected in Zimbabwe. In my hamlet in Southeast Nigeria, it's also held sacred, although such myth is already fast eroded. Similar cultural affinity indeed. Yeah, it's really interesting about snakes in general. Zimbabweans are very scared of snakes. Like, it's a huge phobia that people have. And as Arthur mentioned, they are sort of associated with traditional spirituality. And there's sometimes sort of like items in local tabloid newspapers where it is believed that people who practice, this might be a controversial word, but I'll say witchcraft, will have, the rumors are that they have a python or a snake in their house somewhere, which kind of aids practicing witchcraft, usually to gain financial success. In fact, there was a rumor, I believe, that somebody was driving, excuse me, down Bordeaux Road and threw a python out the window, and that it was sort of vomiting money. So pythons are associated with that sort of traditional practice. Someone has posted, is it true that pythons always are a couple? I do not know. I don't know if anyone can answer that question. I have no idea. Does anyone know how pythons associate?
Well, just to say something, I don't know how they associate, but to pick up on what you were explaining concerning pythons, where I come from in Nigeria, pythons are also sacred. And they don't harm you, they do their thing. They can go through your backyard or your front door and do what, they're just passing through the village to go to wherever. And normally they ask you to leave them alone. to pass. So when I used to go and visit my grandmother, it was shocking to me. It was my first time in the village, and she said, leave it alone. And so they will come and, you know, pass, and it's not harmful. I think it has to do with spirituality, like Arthur said. People are related to some gods, and so there's some sort of protection they give to human beings. And so human beings are also supposed to protect them and not harm them. So yeah, so that's what it is. I don't know the deeper meanings, but that's what I was told as a child.
Okay, that's really interesting. What I know about snakes, pythons in particular, is that they're not poisonous. That if they're going to, they kill their prey by sort of, what is it, squeezing? I'm not sure what the correct term is. But yeah, they are revered and feared in some ways here. Okay, so going back to the chat, somebody was saying, exactly was thinking about, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, chi and eke. I'm not sure, eke is snake, it's spiritual.
Chineke.
Chineke is God. Means
Okay.
God.
Okay. And that is where?
In Southeast Nigeria.
Okay.
South
All right.
Nigeria.
Okay.
Tanda, can I just add in something quickly just on pythons?
Yeah.
I'll try find the story and share it with Chiogor, but a couple of weeks, maybe 2 months ago, I came across a story online. It was on one of the tabloids where a guy was driving from Harare to Mutare, and he drove over a python, and him and his friend got out of the car. They took a picture of them holding this dead python. And a week later, he then drove past the same place that he drove over the python, and then a sinkhole just like was created, and then his car went in, and then he died on the spot. And then so there's a picture of him holding a python, him and his friend holding a python, and then there's a picture of where the accident happened and where he died. I'll try to find that article and I'll share it with Chiogor.
Wow, I haven't seen that story, Arthur. Thank you for sharing that. That's pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna move on the chat. Somebody's saying, do you also want to talk more about the mighty Victoria Falls? I hear you can get the best view from the Zim side. I can attest, and I'm sure Arthur will agree, that Zimbabwe side of the Victoria Falls is incredible. It is the best side,
Yes.
like hand down. It's not even a vote. So Victoria Falls is on the borders, Zimbabwe and Zambia. So you can see it from both sides, but I've not seen the Zambian side, I will confess. But from pictures and having seen the Zimbabwe side, of course, I mean, it is magnificent. It is one of the most amazing natural forces, very powerful, very spiritual. They call it Musiotunya, which is the language of the local people there, and it means the smoke that thunders. And basically, when the water falls down to the bottom of the gorge, it's such a powerful drop that it kind of comes back up as this big cloud of smoke. It looks smoky. And you can see it from far, far away in the distance. It is quite a magnificent experience. So when you come to Zimbabwe, definitely come and visit Victoria Falls. Arthur, when was the last time you went to Victoria Falls?
Oh, don't ask me such questions in front of people. I was young. I was 12 the last time I went to the Victoria Falls. Yeah, I haven't been there as an adult now, but it is a very beautiful place, and there's been a long-standing fight that I think between Zambia and Zimbabwe on the Moswatunya ownership that I think now we've come to like peace at, like we both own it.
Okay, I have a question for either of you. So Robert Mugabe was, you know, a highly respected man to many Zimbabweans before he passed. He was a huge political figure and was there for a very long time. Has there been a sort of difference since his passing in the political life of Zimbabwe? You know, does it look like a huge Iroko tree had fallen, or has life moved on normally? What's been the change? What's been the difference?
Okay, I'll go first. I think Robert Mugabe was a very controversial figure. For many people, he was a hero, a liberator, sort of like, even though, as Arthur mentioned in his presentation, that he only became president in the late 80s. He was a prime minister before, but he was the symbol of the liberation struggle. And at the beginning of his term, his vision and leadership, especially concerning education and health, was it was amazing. He really developed those two sectors. As a former teacher, he was very passionate about education. During colonial times, there were very limited options for for Black people to get an education, and he really turned that around. So for many people, he will be remembered for that and for the investment and development of the health sector. But also being the symbol of a very much sort of watched war against segregation and colonial rule. Unfortunately, he, I think, stayed in power too long, and he became unpopular because he became more and more repressive. So before he died in 2019, I think that's right, Arthur?
Yeah.
In 2017, there was a coup to remove him from power from within his party. He was peacefully removed from power. I mean, he eventually actually resigned. Maybe some of you might have seen on television when he did resign, Zimbabweans were very, very happy because they had begun to associate him and his leadership with suffering and high prices of goods, just a poor standard of living, which I think largely was because of the effects of land reform. So he died in 2019, and for most Zimbabweans, we'd only kind of really known President Mugabe as our leader, and the mythology around him made us feel like he would be president pretty much forever. And so when he was removed from power, everybody was very happy because of this idea that we would have a restart, a reset, looking at our country's fortunes to improve and the lives of ordinary Zimbabweans to improve. And he was replaced by his former vice president, Emerson Mnangagwa, who is our current president. But I think because he had just kind of painted himself into a corner as being a villain, after the coup happened, when he died 2 years later, it was kind of like a non-event in a way. I felt that for sure, because he was very old when he died. I think he was in his early 90s. And I think being removed from power really affected his health. I think that's probably part of the reason why he passed away so soon after.
Yeah, and President Mugabe is such he's a topic on his own, really. And he was quite an outstanding man, a very intelligent man. And a lot of Zimbabweans and African people revere him for how he stood against the colonial empire to give back Zimbabwe to Zimbabweans, as people say it. And I think at this point I'll delve into the land reform, where it is something that actually was not particularly pioneered by President Mugabe. This is something that started from the War Veterans Association, who were now frustrated that the land reform was taking too long. And the war veterans had gone, they'd taken up arms as child soldiers to liberate the country so that Zimbabweans could regain their land that had been taken during the colonial era. So then when the war veterans started attacking firstly, the war veterans had approached the president to say, you need to be quick with the land reform, and they didn't get the response that they wanted. So they started attacking farmers, going to farms, and that put Robert Mugabe in a corner. And he had to then follow through with expediting the land reform. So then that gave a narrative that Robert Mugabe was the one who was behind the farm invasions and all of that, but that really was not him. But he had to follow what the people what the war veterans had demanded, because they had gone to war to fight for the country, and now they wanted their country back. And that left Zimbabwe in shambles for a very long time, because the land redistribution program, how it worked, did not really produce the results that were favorable to the economy of Zimbabwe. However, coming back to the new government, Chirogo, what you asked, if I look at land in Zimbabwe now and land usage, land that has been idle for quite a while, there are a lot of people, my age mates, our age mates, Tawanda, young farmers, young people who are now starting to go and start farming initiatives and farming projects in and around the country on land that has been idle. So there's now some form of food security within the country. I can't speak to how vast that food security is, but from the small initiatives that I know, there are a lot of young people who are now into farming, and they produce vegetables mainly, and some of them are into maize meal farming, which is one of our staples here. A lot of people are into cattle farming, and these are people that I know personally or through friends of friends, or people that I've seen on social media, and sometimes on the Zimbabwe ZBC, that's the Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation, some of the programs that they put in, and then they showcase people utilizing the land as it was intended to. And also speaking on the new government, I do think that when Mugabe was deposed, people expected a quick turnaround. And the reality of things is it took a long time to destroy a strong economy. And it is unrealistic to have a quick turnaround. There's no quick fix to this situation that we're in Zimbabwe. But one thing that I can say for myself personally is, if Mugabe was still in power, I would not have moved back to Zimbabwe. I lived in Cape Town for 12 years. I would not have moved back to Zimbabwe because he was a very homophobic man. And he made it very, very clear in some of his speeches, especially when it was election campaign time. I really don't know what that had to do with anything or I had to speak upon homosexuality, but he made it, he made sure that he did. And with the current government, it is not made public, but the Gays and Lesbians Association of Zimbabwe, they now fly their flag at their offices alongside the Zimbabwean flag. And these offices were frequently raided during the Mugabe era, but now these offices are not raided. And the Gays and Lesbians Association are allowed to provide help for men in general. And they've received funding that was approved by the current government to open 5 men's clinics around the country. So there are things that are happening with the current government, but I think a lot of the things that are highlighted are negative things. Last night I was actually having a conversation with some friends of mine over dinner, and we were talking about how now quite a lot of young business people are now confident in their businesses, in their small scale businesses, whether it's food production, whether it's making hair products, whether it's opening a smoothie shop or whatever. I've now seen a lot of young businesses and young business owners opening their their businesses, and their businesses actually growing. And yeah, this is happening in what we call the Second Republic. This is actually now called the Second Republic. Post Mugabe is called Second Republic. I hope that answers your question, Kyogo.
I just want to add a little something to what Arthur said about land reform. Our war against sort of colonialism, which ended in 1979, with independence happening in 1980, was primarily for the land. That was the reason why the war was fought. And in the end, when the war ended, because the ZANU-PF, which is the ruling political party, signed an agreement with the former Rhodesian government that included that after the first 10 years of independence, that Britain would compensate white farmers for their land, be willing seller, willing buyer. But that was an agreement that was a key part of the agreement that ended the war. And what happened was, after the first 10 years, when Robert Mugabe spoke to, I believe it was Tony Blair's government, and said, Britain had agreed to honor that they would pay the farmers for the land, Tony Blair turned around and said, no, that's not happening. So kind of like Mugabe's, I guess, controversial land reform program came about because of that sort of the UK reneging on their promise to compensate white farmers.
Oh, okay, Tawanda, I think there was a question, I think, on getting Zimbabwean visa, how easy it is. And then also, do you have Southern African community visa movement area where you move freely among yourselves without a visa? And then for outsiders, how easy is it to get a visa?
Okay, I think that generally, I think it is, I will go ahead and say that I'm not exactly sure. But my understanding is that most African countries, it is easy to get a visa to come to Zimbabwe. Yeah, there is some freedom of movement for Zimbabweans, I do believe, with South Africa and Uganda. I think for sure that it is easy. I don't know, Arthur, do you know a little bit more?
Yeah, so in general, for anyone to get a visitor's visa into Zimbabwe, it's very simple. Usually you can just get it at the airport when you come in, then you can just get stamped in. And I think for think for America and some European countries, you pay a visa fee. For the SADC region, it's free. You just come in. You come in and go for visits as you please. It's only for business when then you have to have specific visas. But visitors visas to come into Zimbabwe, they're very simple to come. Oh, I can see Chris says $55 for the visa. Yeah, for EU and USA citizens. But for African citizens, it should be free. I know definitely SADC and East Africa, it's free. You just come and get stamped at the airport, and yeah.
Thanks, Arthur. There's another question in the chat. Somebody said, you spoke briefly about a god when you mentioned the Lake Kariba. Do you know of any other gods people believed in or spiritual acts that people performed prior to Christianity and Western religion?
Okay, so do you want to go first?
No, please go ahead.
Okay, so the god that I spoke of is Nyami Nyami. He's a serpent god, and in times of famine and hunger, Nyami Nyami used to rise from the waters, and the people in the surrounding areas would cut his flesh for meat as sustenance, as the story goes. And his wife was a mermaid, and they lived in the water body that was then built later, that was then extended into Lake Kariba. And if you go to Kariba, the people that live there are actually some stories of Nyami Nyami on YouTube. So you can find out more on YouTube. I'll also share a link with Shogo on that. Then you can get the story of Nyami Nyami much better on that. In terms of other gods, Zimbabweans pre-colonization, pre-missionaries, the Zimbabweans did not really have other gods. They had a god called, our god is called Tumwari. So even now when people go to church, we pray to Mwari. Even within the Christian faith, we still call God Mwari. So people prayed to Mwari. Some people called him Tenzi, some people called him Ishe. In different places, Mwari has got different names. But it has always been the one supreme being. And how Mwari was revered, how people communicated to Mwari was people communicated to Mwari or asked for things to Mwari through their ancestors. So they would have rituals, and people who practice traditional spirituality still have rituals where they speak to their ancestors and they ask for what they need, and they ask their ancestors to intercede to them, to Mwari. So yeah, that is the traditional spirituality of Zimbabwe.
Thanks, Arthur. One more comment in the chat. Thank you, Arthur. It was amazing to know about Zimbabwe. It's always on my mind because of Bob Marley's song. I'm interested in history and culture books. It's very true that Bob Marley wrote a song, Zimbabwe. Bob Marley was actually invited to perform in 1980 when the colonial government handed over to Black majority rule. So he came to Zimbabwe and he wrote that song specifically for us. Personally, I think it was Bob Marley's best song. But yeah, Zimbabweans love reggae music. Arthur mentioned Zim dancehall. Zim dancehall, kind of very similar to Jamaican dancehall music, but with sort of local rhythm, local vibes. And as Arthur mentioned, you know, it's an important music of the youth. And the youth kind of use dancehall music to talk about, you know, the struggles that they're having. At the moment, Zimbabwe is a majority youth population. There are more young people under the age of, I want to say 25 than any other population group. So they're the ones who've been most affected by Zimbabwe's economic downward spiral, and they are very frustrated. So Zim dancehall is an important means for them to talk about the issues that are concerning, that they're concerned with. Okay. Somebody asked, I'm super curious, is sadza or mopani served as a national food, or is it found in supermarkets? Arthur, our food producer, maybe you can answer that question.
So yes, sadza and mopani worms. I mean, sadza and mopani worms is actually one of my favorite meals. So yes, so when mopani worms are in season, and I think like this, that actually stocks of mopani worms. Mopani worms are just dried, dehydrated mopani worms are sold in supermarkets. So you can go buy them in supermarkets and you can cook them at home. In delis and some restaurants, they will serve sadza and mopani worms. Yes.
Okay, I don't think there are any more questions in the chat. I don't know if anybody would like to add anything. It's something that you want to know about Zimbabwe. It is beautiful. Please come and visit. We will take you out, well, not in COVID time, but we will take you out and show you a good time and show you the beautiful spirit of the people of Zimbabwe, who are very welcoming and warm, and we really appreciate and love visitors.
Tawanda,
there's a question in the chat from
I'm sorry. Sorry, I didn't see that. Okay. In England, it was thought that with Joshua Nkomo would have made a better leader than Mugabe, and the revolution would have turned out very differently. Do you think this is true? Well, that's a very interesting question. I think Joshua Nkomo is kind of considered to be like the father of the revolution. It all started with him. I think his character and personality was very, very different from Mugabe. I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is. I think history, the way it played out, that didn't happen. I wouldn't say I'm sure. I don't know, Arthur, what do you think?
So things would definitely have been different if Joshua Nkomo had been the leader of Zimbabwe. And we do refer to him as the father of the nation. However, one thing about Zimbabwe's liberation, and one thing about Zimbabwe in general, as much as there's a lot of prevalence of Christianity in Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe is a country that is guided by traditional spirituality. So within the liberation struggle, there was a lot of consultation. There was a lot of consultation to spirit mediums as to who should lead Zimbabwe. And there were quite a lot of people who went to consult. Joshua Nkomo went, Robert Mugabe went, Abel Muzorewa went, and I think Edgar Tekele went. There were quite a lot of people who were vying for the presidency of Zimbabwe. And the person, from the narrative that I know, the person who came out strongest from these consultations by the spiritual mediums was Robert Mugabe at that time. However, his demise, one of the reasons of his demise was that the vows that he had taken when he was given leadership of Zimbabwe, he did not fulfill them because he'd been converted into full-on Catholicism, and he renounced his traditional spirituality, and the guidance that he had from traditional spiritualists left him, and then things started going haywire. So yes, things would have been different with Joshua Nkomo was to be the president of Zimbabwe, but there were other forces at play other than political forces or agreements with Britain or people's views. There were other forces that were at play, even for the people who were in the actual liberation struggle. Both my parents were in the liberation struggle. So sometimes my mother tells me stories of when they were on the battlefield, they would know that if they saw a line of elephants just blocking their way, they needed to turn around and use another route. If they saw an eagle circling a certain area, then they would know that that's where the enemy would be, and they'd know to attack that area. And that sometimes when small groups of people were hungry, they would go under a mohacha tree, which is also a very sacred tree here in Zimbabwe, and then they'd find food under the tree. So during the liberation struggle, aside from people's opinions, there were also other factors that were guiding and guarding the people in the liberation struggle.
Thanks, Arthur. Another question has come in. If it's possible, could you talk about the fashion sector in Zimbabwe?
Wow. I'm actually entering the fashion sector. Well, I won't say the fashion sector, but more of just clothing manufacturing. But I'm still very young and new to it. But I do know there's an existing fashion sector in Zimbabwe. It's very small, it's very niche. The young people that, young brands, a lot of stuff that I wear, I make myself, or I buy from young brands here. So if you go to like local markets, if you go to Motor Republic, if you go to sporadic markets that we have around the city or in the country, you'll find locally made brands. The fashion industry here is still pretty young, but while it's still very young, I think one of the things that really impressed me as I started looking into the fashion scene in Zimbabwe is the people that are really present in the current fashion scene are practicing sustainable fashion. So using sustainable materials, long-lasting materials, and not practicing fast fashion, which is really being practiced around the world, which is like fashion where you go buy very cheap clothing that will not last for a long time, and then you end up throwing things away, which is like which creates over consumerism, which is one of the problems that we have in this world when it comes to ecology and all of that. So yes, we do have a fashion industry, and I hope at some point I'll be able to share more information on that. But what I can tell you right now is the people that I see who are visible and present in the fashion industry in Zimbabwe are practicing sustainable fashion.
As a follow-up to that, in West Africa, a lot of people put on cultural attire, like it's huge, but we don't see that happening in, Southern Africa or even Eastern Africa. So in Zimbabwe, I don't see people, with the glamorous headgears and, colorful African traditional clothes. So why is that?
Oh, wow, controversial question there.
Yeah.
Arthur, do you want to go ahead and I'll add after you?
Yeah, cool. I'll start with that one. So in Southern Africa itself, they're actually South Africa is very, very strong on traditional attire, and they're very proud of it, and they wear it in the most beautiful manner. Namibia also are very strong. I know specifically with the Herero people. And then Zambia, I'm not too sure. I think Zambia in that regard were kind of the same. Mozambique also, I'm not so sure. But Zimbabwe, really, we really don't have what I can call a traditional attire. I know people that practice traditional spirituality have certain fabrics and materials that they wear for their ceremonies. And that's just about it. On Africa Day, we pretty much are like taking stuff from South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, and that's what we're wearing. Yeah, it's quite a painful topic, that one.
Just to add to what Arthur said, it's very true and very noticeable that Zimbabweans, by and large, they don't wear clothing with that, what they call Ankara, whatever. Locally, a lot of people call it Java print. You do see sort of like women of a certain age, I'd say sort of older, maybe 50 or 60 years old, like they'll wear them like with like church outfits or, weddings, special occasions, that sort of thing. Or what you'll see, a little bit of what Arthur's talking about is the younger generation, what I want to say maybe called the cool kids, who do take a lot of inspiration from South Africa, and they tend to wear a sort of Java print style, but in a fresh, funky look. And you can purchase things like that at places like Motor Republic, as Arthur mentioned, but it's definitely not on the scale as it is in West Africa. and East Africa, and I'm not sure why that is. I think it has something to do with the way that we were brought up in our education system and our understanding of ourselves to be very sort of Western and British. And so I think, you know, people sort of gravitate more towards that sort of clothing for that reason. Okay. Are there any other questions? Anybody want to comment or ask anything about Zimbabwe?
One last one from me, maybe the last. So the Doma people that have the two feet, do you know if that's an abnormality or it's normal? I mean, why is that?
As far as I know, that's their genetics, because they're specifically tree climbers, and that's just how they've always been. There once was speculation that they used to cut, when people were born, they used to cut their three middle toes, and then the other two toes will just grow big. But from what I learned later is that they're just born with two toes. But there's really very little information about them, and they're kind of kept as, not so much as a secret, but they're kind of left alone and hidden pretty much. But yeah, from what I know, they're born with two toes.
Thank you so much, Arthur, for a wonderful presentation. I really thoroughly enjoyed it and learned a lot, actually. Maybe I'll pass over to Chiogor to wrap up for today. Thank you, everyone.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Tawanda.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I still have one more. Sorry, everyone. One more question. When is the best time to come to Zimbabwe for those who want to visit?
December.
Okay, why?
Because everyone is having a party.
It's party month. Everybody has decided more or less, like after the first week of December, it's party time. Until after New Year. So yeah, everyone's always in a good mood. It's the fertile time, you know, it's the rainy season. Everybody's partying all the time.
Okay, that's good. What's the weather like in December when we come? And I hope you host us.
Absolutely.
Oh yes, we will.
So be ready for everybody.
It's hot and rainy. It's not that much rain in December, but it will be hot and some rain. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Arthur and Tawanda. If we have no other question, thanks everyone for coming. Anthony, Chibuzo, Chris Cotton, Claire Dongo, Emma Delight. Who else? There's a lot of people here. Let me see if I can get everybody. If I'm unable to mention your name, thank you so much for coming. A few announcements before we go. If you would like to get updates on our activities, please drop your email in the chat. But if we have your email already, you don't need to do that. You know, we have events, you know, till the end of the year. And then please follow us on social media, Instagram at africanpressclub.com, the same thing, at African Press Club, the same thing on Facebook and Twitter. Then if you have suggestions of the kind of events you would like to see us put together, also feel free to send us an email at info@africanpressclub.com, info@africanpressclub.com. And that's it. Thank you, people. Everyone do have a lovely, lovely Saturday, a lovely weekend, and we hope to see you soon. Take care now. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Such an interesting time.
Obiageli. Oh, okay. We didn't see your face. It's now we're seeing your face. That's so cheeky. Like, why didn't you show your face all the time?
Because of environment, and we stepped out, so I had to isolate myself so I could do the meeting.
Okay.
So the environment is not the best of places.
Yes, yes.
Okay, very interesting.
Bye, Connie.
Yeah, let me stop the recording first.